there is a sound that belongs to another era. A Ferrari 512 at full throttle sounds like the world tearing itself open, a mechanical scream so violent it rewires something in your nervous system. You don't just hear it, you feel it in your teeth. For 70 years that sound was the promise. It was the whole religion. Then on May 25th, 2026, in a glass sports complex on the outskirts of Rome, Ferrari unveiled the Luce. There was no V12, there was no roar, there was silence, a light show, and a car that looked like nothing Ferrari had ever built. 550,000 euros, 4 electric motors, smooth rounded edges designed by the man who designed the iPhone. The internet called it disgrace. Former chairman Luca di Montezemolo went on Italian television and said Ferrari risked destroying a legend. The stock fell 8% in a single day, and in Maranello the boardroom didn't flinch. That reaction tells you everything you need to understand about what Ferrari has actually become. This is not a story about a car, this is a story about one of the greatest brand transformations in corporate history, and why the people screaming the loudest were never the ones who mattered. Enzo Ferrari hated road cars. That is not a metaphor. The man built them because he had no choice. Racing was his obsession, and racing teams needed money. Road cars were the invoice. In the 1950s and 60s, Ferrari's entire commercial logic was built around funding the Scuderia, the racing operation that consumed him completely. He sold road cars to wealthy clients almost reluctantly, often treating them with contempt if they had the nerve to ask him to modify their order. The Prancing Horse existed for the track, everything else was overhead. But what Enzo created by accident was something far more powerful than a race team. By keeping production deliberately small, by wrapping every car in racing mythology, by treating exclusivity not as a marketing strategy, but as a personal philosophy, he built a brand with a gravitational pull unlike anything the automotive world had ever seen. People didn't just want a Ferrari, they wanted to be the kind of person who owned one. That psychological architecture, scarcity plus mythology plus performance plus suffering, became the foundation of a business worth over $60 billion today. Enzo died in 1988, but the machine he accidentally built was only just getting started. Here is the moment the modern era truly began. In 2022, Ferrari did something it had explicitly promised never to do. It built an SUV. They refused to call it that, naming it the Purosangue, Italian for thoroughbred, and technically classifying it as a 4-door sports car. But it was a high-riding, 5-seat, family-usable vehicle, and every Ferrari purist on the planet treated it as a betrayal. The forums erupted. Journalists wrote eulogies for the brand, and then something interesting happened. The Purosangue sold out immediately. Waiting lists stretched beyond 2 years. Ferrari reported its strongest financial results in company history, with an EBIT margin of 28.3% in 2024, and revenues rising to 6.7 billion euros. The Purosangue didn't damage the brand. It funded a new factory. It attracted a new category of buyer, wealthier, older, with families and multiple properties, and a desire for a Ferrari they could actually live with. The purists lost that argument the moment the order book closed. What nobody realised at the time was that the Purosangue wasn't a detour. It was a test. Ferrari was checking how much the brand could stretch before it broke. The answer was, further than anyone imagined. And if you're watching this and you still think this story ends with the purist winning, hit subscribe, because what comes next will genuinely surprise you. The billionaire class of 2026 is not the billionaire class of 1986. The old guard collected cars the way they collected paintings, for beauty, for mechanical artistry, for the visceral experience of controlling something dangerous at high speed. The new generation of ultra-high net worth individuals grew up with smartphones, not carburettors. Their status symbols are space companies, private health clinics, and technology investments. When they think about a weekend experience, they are less likely to think about lapping a circuit in something with a manual gearbox, and more likely to think about effortless power, connected interiors, and something that communicates technological sophistication to the people around them. Global wealth data confirms the shift. The number of individuals with assets exceeding $50 million grew by nearly 30% in the 5 years leading up to 2026, concentrated heavily in technology, finance, and emerging markets. These buyers don't have a sentimental relationship with exhaust notes, they have a relationship with status, and status is increasingly defined by what is rare, expensive, and genuinely hard to acquire. Ferrari's CEO Benedetto Vigna understood this precisely. He came from the semiconductor industry, not motorsport. He read the demographic data, and he made a decision that the next Ferrari buyer would look nothing like the last one. On the evening of May 25th, 2026, Ferrari brought journalists to Rome in black vans escorted by police. Security staff stuck stickers over camera lenses to prevent any unauthorized images. 5 Luces sat under dramatic lighting, painted in colours that ran from Ferrari red to pearl white to soft blue. The car was unlike anything the brand had produced. The exterior was smooth, continuous, and rounded, with no sharp angles or aggressive lines. Johnny Ive, the designer who gave the world the iMac and the original iPhone, had spent 5 years working with Ferrari's Sentra style to create something that looked, in the words of one journalist, as though it had been grown rather than designed. Inside, precision-machined aluminium toggles sat alongside a curved 16-inch driver display. The steering wheel hub took 4 hours to machine from a single billet. The car seated 5, weighed over 2 tons, and produced 1,113 horsepower from 4 electric motors. It would do 0 to 100 km per hour in 2.5 seconds. The range was 330 miles. And to preserve some connection to the Ferrari experience, the powertrain amplified the natural vibrations of the electric drivetrain into an engineered acoustic signature. Not a V12, not even close. But not silence either. The price was €550,000. Ferrari CEO Benedetto Vigna called it a very, very important day and a new chapter. The internet had other words for it. The reaction arrived within hours. Enzo is rolling in his grave trended across social media. Automotive forums compared the Luce unfavourably to a Nissan Leaf. Pierre-Olivier Essig at Air Capital told Bloomberg it looked like a mix between a Honda Accord and something else entirely. Ferrari's stock fell 8% in a single trading session, wiping billions from the company's market capitalization. Then the attack came from inside the house. Luca di Montezemolo, the man who ran Ferrari from 1991 to 2014 and presided over some of the greatest road and racing cars in its history, went on Italian television and said, "We risk destroying a legend. I hope they at least remove the Prancing Horse from that car." He added, with particular venom, "It is certainly a car that at least the Chinese won't copy." Italy's transport minister joined the pile-on. Analysts at Oddo BHF described reactions from Ferrari's most passionate fans as largely negative. RBC Capital Markets noted investor concern that the design could weigh on residual values. For 48 hours it looked like a corporate disaster, but then something shifted. CEO Vigna appeared publicly and said the Luce was already clocking up orders. The order book, he noted, was extending into late 2027, and the stock began to recover. Here is the part that nobody in the comments section wants to accept. Ferrari does not need the angry people. The Luce is priced at $640,000. The buyers capable of writing that check number fewer than 100,000 people on the entire planet. That group is not spending its evenings posting on automotive forums. It is not watching reaction videos. It does not care what the internet thinks of the design. What it cares about deeply is whether the object it's buying is rare, genuinely expensive to acquire, and inaccessible to people with merely ordinary wealth. When the loudest, most visible segment of the automotive community declares that it hates the Luce, Ferrari's actual target customer receives a signal. The signal is, this is not for everyone. Hermes does not adjust its bag designs when people online say they are ugly. Rolex does not respond to forum complaints. The behavioural economics of ultra-luxury have always operated on a paradox. The more a product is rejected by the mainstream, the more desirable it becomes to the buyers who define themselves by being above the mainstream. Ferrari did not accidentally create a divisive car. They created a product that would generate exactly this kind of noise, attract exactly this kind of attention, and be purchased quietly by exactly the right people. For most of its history, Ferrari competed with Lamborghini, McLaren and Porsche. That era is effectively over. When you examine Ferrari's actual financial profile, the comparison that makes analytical sense is not to other car companies. Ferrari's EBIT margin in 2025 was 29.5%. Toyota's is around 10%. BMW hovers near 9%. The closest comparisons in terms of profitability and pricing power are Hermes, which operates at roughly 40% margins, Apple during its peak iPhone cycles, and Rolex, which produces fewer than 1 million watches per year and maintains a decade-long waiting list for certain models. Ferrari sold fewer than 14,000 cars in all of 2024. Rolex sells fewer than 1 million watches. The logic is identical. Extreme scarcity plus extreme brand mythology plus an affluent customer base that is entirely insensitive to economic cycles creates a business that operates outside normal competitive pressure. Lamborghini cancelled its upcoming electric vehicle in 2025 due to weak demand. Bentley has delayed its EV repeatedly. Porsche's Taycan has struggled with sales. Ferrari looked at that landscape and launched anyway, because it is not selling to the same market. It is selling to the same customer who owns the Hermes Birkin, the Patek Philippe, and the private island. That customer does not comparison shop. The financial architecture behind the Luce is more sophisticated than it appears. Ferrari's 2025 revenues reached €7.15 billion, up 7% year-on-year. The company is targeting €7.5 billion in 2026 with an EBITDA margin of 39%, essentially printing money at industrial scale while shipping fewer cars per year than a mid-sized regional manufacturer. The Luce's 122 kilowatt-hour battery, sourced from SK On, is built on an 800-volt architecture, one of the most advanced charging platforms in any production vehicle. But the genius move is not the battery itself, it is what Ferrari has done around it. The company has already established a battery replacement and long-term service program, turning a depreciating asset into a recurring revenue stream. A buyer at $640,000 who returns for a battery service in year 8 or year 10 is a lifetime customer. Ferrari's personalization program, which allows buyers to specify interior materials, exterior colors, and custom finishes, already contributes meaningfully to per-unit revenue above the base price. The Luce will expand that further. Bernstein analysts noted it simply: if Ferrari builds the car, the clients will come. The order book already suggests they are right, so here is where we land. The purists lost. Montezemolo gave his speech. The stock fell 8% and then recovered. The order book for a car that does not begin deliveries until October 2026 already extends into late 2027. Ferrari did not sell its soul. It executed a decade-long transition from an automotive manufacturer into an untouchable luxury monopoly, and the Luce is simply the most visible evidence of how complete that transition has become. The company that Enzo built to fund his racing obsession now operates at margins that luxury conglomerates would envy, with a brand so powerful that even a launch day disaster cannot permanently damage the stock price. The sound of silence at that Rome reveal was not a funeral, it was a statement of intent. Ferrari is no longer asking permission from the people who loved it the way it used to be. It is building the company that the next generation of ultra-wealthy clients wants to own. The purists understand what was lost. What they are slower to understand is that what replaced it may be more durable, more profitable, and more strategically invincible than anything Enzo Ferrari ever imagined. If you found this breakdown useful, share it with someone who still thinks the Luce is a disaster. In 5 years, that conversation will be very different.